Good evening all, and welcome. As a special treat, tonight we have an extra long episode of Let's Not Meet Stories. So you best be sitting comfortably, as it's time to let the darkness take control. I am a 27-year-old girl, and even though this story happened almost 20 years ago, I still think back to it every year around this time. I was a 9-year-old girl in 4th grade, and it was Valentine's Day. We had spent the week decorating our class door for the yearly competition and making a big card for our principal/vice principal and other office staff signed by all of our class, and our entry and invitation to come see our theme decorated door. I don't remember how this part came about, but I was the one to walk downstairs to the office and to turn in our card. It was simple enough, and I always looked forward to getting out of the classroom, even for a little while. So I started to the office. Nothing spectacular happened on the way down or in the office. It was just a normal walk through the halls and down the stairs, and then cheerfully turning in our class Valentine's Day card. I started down the same direction I came from, but had chosen to go up a different set of stairs than the ones I had gone down. Now, just some small layout for you. The school is a big rectangle, with a large auditorium with granite floors, and the second floor was a couple of stories up and had an open balcony with a short railing overlooking this space. The classrooms bordered the hallway and all had windows facing outwards. It was also a World War I historical building and cannot be changed significantly or knocked down. Back to the story. I was coming up and out of the stairwell, and had started to walk towards my classroom. But I heard a whistle, one that sounded like a bird, and instinctively I turned around to see what it was. There was a boy sitting on the floor outside of one of the 6th grade classes. Kids were typically sent to sit outside the classroom as a mild punishment or to calm down. When I turned around to look, I met eyes with the boy, and he had some kind of smirk on his face. Before I could turn back around to start walking, this kid says, "Ooga booga." Seriously, what? I giggled and then just turned around to get back to class. A few seconds later, I was being pushed up against a short railing, looking over the auditorium far below. He pushed and pushed, and it was quite a struggle. I will not pretend like it was easy for me as a little girl, but I somehow managed to kick him right where it mattered, if you know what I mean. The boy dropped down, and I ran crying back to the classroom. I don't remember much of these events that followed immediately after. I really think I was in shock. However, I know exactly how it all turned out. My mum was pissed beyond words. I am her only child, and it took her over 5 years to have me. So needless to say, she was livid at the idea of losing me to a violent child. My mum threatened lawsuits and going to the local news and newspapers. It turns out, this kid had many behavioural, mental, and learning disabilities, and his parents had not been giving him the correct medication or attention that he required. It was a long argument that went on for weeks, but in the end, my mum did have sympathy for the boy who was clearly not being given the care he needed. She did not, however, have sympathy for his parents, who she saw as responsible. My mum settled for having the boy removed from the school district and having the school put in taller railings so this might not happen again to someone else. But the story doesn't end there. After this event, my mum was ultra paranoid and signed her little ballerina up for karate. I was not thrilled about this, and my thought was, I defended myself just fine, so why do I need karate? Anyway, when I showed up for the first class, you want to know who I saw in the room? Yup, it was the boy who had tried to push me over the railings. I pointed him out to my mum, and she was in 100 miles per hour crazy mummy mode all over again. After my mum explaining what the boy had done to the owner/instructor, the boy's mum were told she could no longer bring him to class there, and they were asked to leave immediately. His mum got mad at me. Why she misdirected her anger, I will never know. Her child could have killed me, or left me seriously injured at the very least. It was due to her negligence and her son's behavior. As much as I know it was due to his very unfortunate circumstances, that doesn't make it okay. That doesn't make me feel safe to be in the same room as him. And I also don't know why she thought it would be appropriate for a proven violent child to be taking martial arts. Therapy would have been more a logical route. After that, I didn't stay in karate long, as I always was more of a girly girl, interested in dance and Barbie dolls. All the years later, I still think back to it to this day. I wonder what became of that boy. I wonder if he got the help he needed. I wonder if he remembers, and sometimes I even ask myself if it was all a dream. But it was not a dream. It is always something I will remember, and I've learnt many lessons that day. The biggest being always be aware of your surroundings. This story takes place last summer. I was meeting up with a good friend of mine before we headed off to a barbecue/garden party. The hosts are pretty renowned for being a pain in the ass to deal with, so we decided to have a few drinks at a local pub just to take the edge off beforehand. I arrived early, got myself a drink, and found a seat inside a quiet corner. I basically spent my entire childhood in pubs local to my house, and can always point out a few of my dad's old drinking buddies whenever I go out. Generally, it's a slight nod of my head towards them. Maybe if it's quiet enough, we might have a quick catch-up. The usual stuff about how my dad's doing, or what I am doing nowadays. This time, I was approached mid-sip by a man that I barely recognized, dressed in stained and worn work boots and trousers, and an almost frayed and sun-bleached polo shirt. He sat down opposite me and asked if I was Jeffrey's boy. I let my guard down a bit and assumed that I must have met him before when I was younger, so I answered him, and he starts asking more questions. He started with general questions that didn't raise any alarms for me, like, how old are you now? Where are you working? You living with your parents still? The questions started getting more personal, but I brushed it off, as a drunk not being the most subtle in the world's questions, especially regarding my relationship, whether I had a girlfriend or not, whether I was looking for one. And then he switched to asking if I worked out or not, and how I got arms like that. His words, not mine. I took what I guessed was a compliment and was trying to be polite with him, but began giving bland and as short as possible answers, in the hope that he would get bored or take a hint. That's when he leaned in and started whispering in my ear, almost about how he ran a small side business, that if I ever needed any extra work, and how if I wanted to meet a nice girl, he employed a bunch of them. At this point, I was sick of him, and being so close to him, I could smell what I imagine a pub toilet smelled like if it were left uncleaned for a month. So I finished my drink and decided to just wait outside. After a short while, he arrived and we left for the party. The next day I spoke to my dad about the encounter and had to describe the man to him. He drew a blank until I mentioned the rotten sewage smell. Then he burst into a story about how the man was a well-known guy in the pub and frequented local prostitutes and was only able to stay because his brother owned the place. How his side business at the time was selling homemade amateur pornography to the regular drinkers. That's when it clicked for me. I believe he wanted to cut out the middleman and to produce both, and to both produce and sell his homemade DVDs. I just happened to be young, single, attractive, and potential talent, so he tried scouting. After this, I never went back to that pub, and never pursued a career in adult entertainment either. The last I heard of the man was that he was finally barred from his own brother's pub for groping the barmaid. Sometimes you shouldn't talk to strangers, especially if they want to cast you in a homemade porno. This happened about 12 years ago. I was 16 to 18 during the duration and was female identified at the time. I'm still not sure what to make of this situation, but I've started to realize it may have been more sinister than I thought. This story needs some caveat. First, I'm incredibly naive when it comes to someone flirting with me or hitting on me. I never think people are serious when they hit on me, and this has gotten me into some tight spots in the past. Some of those, like this one, I got out of. Others, I wasn't so fortunate. This also meant that until very recently, I didn't realize the danger I've been in. Second, I grew up in a very small and very evangelical Republican town. My small Methodist church wasn't too crazy on Sunday mornings, but the youth group was much more radical. Speaking in tongues, being slain in the spirit. And when I say my town was small, I mean that my graduating class was 149 students, and we were the biggest graduating class in years. My school was so small that my father was teaching for 3 years. Everyone knew my dad and my family. Third, I believed for the most of my youth that the most important objective in the world was saving souls for Jesus Christ. This conviction trumped everything else, especially feelings of discomfort. In high school, I joined Young Life and became a junior leader quickly after. Young Life, for those of you who don't know, is like a cooler version of youth group, although they would reject this. College kids would meet with high schoolers. They were cool and loved Jesus and would preach at you without you knowing it. We would meet with any high schoolers who wanted to come at someone's house on a Wednesday. It was usually at my parents' place. So I was in high school trying to get people to come to my house to hear about Jesus. Anyone and everyone was welcome, including Ted. Ted was 2 to 3 years older than me, and he was just a weird guy. I don't mean that as judgmental. I'm a weirdo. It's more that something was off about him. At the time, I didn't want to listen to my gut, telling me to stay the hell away from him. Ted was very poor, as was the case for most of my school, so he usually was wearing tattered and smelly clothes. He also couldn't afford a car, so he would walk everywhere, which was a feat in a rural town. Before we started having meetings at my house, I would give him rides to ones at other places. I would see him walking there on the side of the road, and I would feel bad. the first meeting at my house, he showed up 3 hours early. I was a little put off, but I figured he didn't have a great home life and thought he just wanted to be out of his home. I gave him some food and let him have free rein of our computer while I did homework. The meeting happened and he went home. I told myself that my ill feelings about him were just as sinful as my judgmental nature. After that, I started to see him around school more often, and it weirded me out a bit, but I chalked it up to paranoia. Women often feel like they're overreacting when they feel threatened by men, mostly because society and literally everyone else tells us we are. Don't ignore your gut. The next time I had a young life at my house, he literally showed up right from school, about an hour's walk from my house, so 4 hours early. I was not expecting him at all, and my parents weren't home from work yet. I had been in the shower when he showed up. I came down in my bath towel and a towel wrapped on my head. When I heard knocking, I assumed it was my cousin, my best friend and closest neighbor, so I didn't bother to get dressed. There he was, and I'm in my goddamn towel. I told him that he could help himself to whatever was in the fridge, and that he could use the computer while I finished getting ready. I ran upstairs, locked the bathroom door, and texted my parents and cousin, asking when they'd be home, but no one responded. I finished my shower and got dressed. When I came out of my room, he was standing at the foot of the stairs just staring. I was completely unnerved and asked him if he was having any problems with the computer. He didn't say anything, just stared at me, and eventually went back downstairs to the basement where the computer was. I ran to my room, locked the door, and waited for one of my parents to arrive home. Finally, the meeting took place, and he went home. Then he started showing up at random places I was at. I still can't figure out how he knew I would be in the mall, or at the soccer field, or at home, and he would just be there. He started showing up at my parents' house on days there weren't meetings. Luckily, around this time I got a license, and I kept offering rides to anyone. I would caravan people home, and by the time I got back, Ted would be there, but so would my parents. Thankfully, my dad started to catch on, even though I never said a word to anyone. My dad was a woodshop teacher, and he and my mum built their house, and he built himself an epic woodshop detached from it. When Ted would come over, my dad would direct him to his woodshop and make him help him with a project while telling him I wasn't around until he left. This happened until I graduated, where Ted would just be there. After I went to college in a different state, Ted kept showing up at my parents' house until my dad told him I wouldn't be around anymore. So anyway, is this guy a stalker? Lonely? Socially inept? It just creeps me out. I'm back in my hometown to take care of my parents. Ted, don't come round. Let's not meet again. This just happened, and I'm still not sure if I wasn't tripping by accident. I'd just come out of the gym, and like always I decided to smoke a cigarette before getting on the subway. I generally do this because I love how futile it is attempting to be healthy, while also having a smoking habit. It's a rainy day, and there's practically no one outside. I turn my back to the door as I attempt to light my cigarette. The door behind me was pushed open. I don't turn back. I heard footsteps coming in my direction, and then stopping. I get that gut feeling that only happens when you subconsciously pick up that something is amiss, and amiss something was. I turned my eyes ever so slightly to my left to realize an elderly gentleman is standing just a few centimeters away from me. This poor guy looked like a wreck, and I'm well familiar with wrecks. He seemed like what would happen if the Crypt Keeper and Freddy Krueger had a love child which they promptly locked in the basement over how repugnant he looked. His eyes were sunken. Half of his hair had fallen out in random spots. His skin was so spotty that Cruella de Vil might want to jack it out of him. I realized then that Mange Jeffrey Dahmer was mouthing something in a very raspy and hissy voice. He seemed to have a lot of trouble breathing. "My lighter. I can't find my lighter." I offered him mine. "Do you need a lighter?" I asked, attempting to sound somewhat cold and aloof, but instead coming off as the chirpiest fella off the Disney cartoons. He refused. I stepped back to gain some distance from him. All the while, this guy's eyes are on my face. I can feel them, even if I'm not looking at them. I decided to gain some more distance between us and move all the way to the opposite end of the street. Like the millennial I am, my eyes were glued to my phone. I look up, realizing again that something was wrong. This forceless Darth Vader was nearly on top of me again. I almost jumped out of my wet boots. This guy was closer to me physically than my father has ever been emotionally. I stay silent, eyeing him, trying to figure out his next move. "I'll call you God," he wheezed. "Excuse me?" I asked, certain that my ears were more treacherous than the Slavic girl from MySpace that asked for your credit card numbers in '08. "That's what a father calls a son. You're my son, aren't you?" he struggled to say. I nod affirmatively negatively. "Then you are the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost." Holy ghosting on Tinder, Batman. This guy was obviously off. I take a few steps back as he blithers in both Portuguese and English about God and a son. I was pretty sure this was the scene where he'd pull a knife and stab me through the jugular as O Fortuna played in the background. Since my survival skills are nil, I did what every 20-something-year-old does when threatened. I retreated into my phone's world. He huffed and puffed about God, me, the Son, the Holy Spirit, and all that other stuff. I couldn't hear, nor did I want to. Finally, he asks, "Are you there, God?" Without breaking visual contact with my phone, I answer, "No." He begins to walk back, still staring at me, mumbling something under the warm blanket of his strained breaths. Finally, he leaves, just as he has entered, and leaving me even more confused than I already was. Am I unknowingly some reincarnation of a junkie god messiah? Jesus. Pay a guy a drink before creating a cult around him. Am I right, boys? My first day moving into student halls, I was greeted by a very friendly guy named Dominic. He was very camp and obviously gay, but I didn't have a problem with that. He offered to help me unpack in my room, then go for a drink with me. Although I thought he was a little too overfamiliar, I was delighted that I had made a friend so quickly and accepted his offer. He put a tremendous amount of effort into helping me put everything in the appropriate place in my room. We then went for a drink at a student bar. I made a point to tell him I was straight, as I suspected he may have a bit of a crush on me, hence why he was being so nice. However, he didn't show any signs of dismay and continued chatting to me. I liked him a lot. He was very intelligent, and interesting to talk to, and I was very pleased that I had a new friend already. I was worried that I'd be lonely in the uni dorms. He didn't live in the same building as me. He lived just across. I was studying creative writing, and he was studying business. But we started to hang out a lot. Although I liked Dominic, I did start to find him a little overbearing. He would send me texts and messages on Facebook all the time, and would get upset if I didn't reply, even if it only was about 5 minutes. He would always want to know what I was doing, and if I disappeared off Facebook for a while, he would want to know where I'd been all day. One time, I even sent him a text mentioning I was on a train, and he texted back, "Why are you on a train? Why am I not invited to wherever you're going?" I was on my way to my part-time job. I made quite a few other friends, and he would always show visible signs of displeasure whenever they were around and whenever I talked to him about them. He would tell me he disliked them and that I shouldn't trust them. He was very possessive, and I personally can't stand clingy friends, so I tried to distance myself from him a bit. But the more I pulled away, the tighter he held. I still hung out with him, and still cared about him, but I was starting to worry about where this friendship was going. I was pretty sure this guy had a crush on me, and soon my suspicions were confirmed. I met this girl at a party, called Anna, and asked her out on a date. She accepted. I was really thrilled, and told Dominic about it. The second I told him, his face fell. "Why are you going on a date with a girl?" he asked me, sounding very worried. 'Cause I want to? But I'm gonna be jealous. Please don't go. It'll really hurt me. You wouldn't want to hurt me. I'm your best friend. I had never actually told him he was my best friend before, and I found the way he was acting now both annoying and a little creepy. "I'm sorry, but I told you I was straight before, Dominic. We can still be friends, but I'm not going to stop dating just for you." He remained sulky and miserable for the rest of the night. I told myself that he'd have to accept it and get over it soon. But when I was on the date with Anna, I kept getting phone calls from unknown numbers. I answered at first, but I couldn't hear anything on the other end. It was just as though someone was listening. I started to ignore the calls, but you would not believe how frequently they were coming in. They started coming in non-stop, and I couldn't even tell the time because they would seriously not stop. I had to put my phone on airplane mode, and after about an hour of my phone on airplane mode, I switched it off. The very second I did this, the calls came in again. Although I was unnerved, I enjoyed my date with Anna, and we agreed to meet up again. When I got home from the date, Dominic was waiting right outside my dorm, his phone in hand. "How was your date? Did you like her?" he asked, sounding miserable. "Yeah, I do." "Why did you keep calling me? Was that you?" "No." He was obviously lying. "But anyway, I've been waiting to tell you, I hear she's a massive slut. She keeps sleeping around with loads of guys. You should stay away. She'll break your heart." Anna had no mutual connections with Dominic, so I asked him how he could possibly know about this. He just told me he'd done his research. I was angered and told him it was none of his business, and that I'd find out for myself. He started crying, saying how he was just worried about me, and stormed off. I think he was hoping I'd follow him, but I didn't, and went to my room, angry that he would try and interfere with my life like this. I have had unrequited crushes on friends before, but they don't feel the same, and I never try to force it. But Dominic only got worse. When I got back to my student room, Dominic had sent me screenshots on Facebook of a conversation he had allegedly had with Anna. The messages showed her boasting to him about how she used me and how she was planning to break my heart. Obviously, this didn't ring at all true, as one, how would she even know who Dominic was, and why would she message him? And two, why would she tell a friend of mine so openly what her plans were for me, when he would obviously just show me? I demanded that he show me the conversation from Anna on his computer screen with me there, but he told me that he had deleted the conversations because they were too upsetting for him to read. I knew right there and then that Dominic was deliberately trying to ruin my relationship with Anna through incredibly deceitful and despicable means, and I told him I wasn't interested in him, that I never would be, and that he better stop right now. He told me that I was being a terrible friend, that all he was doing was trying to look out for me, and he couldn't believe that I was believing a stranger over him. I was seriously pissed off with the way he was acting so selfish and trying to manipulate me now, and I blocked him off social media. He started sending me texts constantly, calling me non-stop, and telling me things like he was so depressed over me, and that he had started taking heroin and was contemplating suicide. Basically, trying to make me worry. He would also constantly send me texts saying how he knew Anna was cheating on me. Me and her started dating properly, and that I had to come to my senses. He was creeping me out so much that I went to stay with my parents for a bit, as I wasn't comfortable living in the same area as him. I had to block his number because the phone calls were constant. People from my uni dorm were sending me angry messages because Dominic had told them a really twisted version of what was going on, making them think Anna was a dirty STD-ridden whore who I had betrayed for him. It then turned out that he had been lying to everyone, telling them that me and him were in a romantic, sexual relationship, and that I had cheated on him with Anna, then left him for her. I furiously set everyone straight, told them that I had never been in a relationship with Dominic, and that everything he told them about Anna was bullshit. Most people believed me, although it took a while to convince everyone that Dominic was a liar. He was very manipulative, and although a lot of his lies were ludicrous, he was very good at making himself sound legit. I decided to go back to my uni dorm after a while, as it was inconvenient for me to stay at my parents' while at uni, as their house was very far from it. I arrived back there quite late, as I really didn't want to run into him. I was so angry about him. I had a new girlfriend and studies to think about. Yet, because of his obsession and harassment, he was now all I could think about. In a very twisted way, I think this is what he wanted. Positively or negatively, he wanted me thinking about him. When I got back, I lay down on my bed, thinking about what to do, when suddenly a brick came flying through my window. I jumped a mile and rolled over the side of my bed, hiding there for a moment, thinking it was burglars coming in or something. But nothing more happened. Once I got over the shock, I cautiously stepped over the broken glass and tried to look out the window when I got a phone call off a number I didn't recognize. I answered it. It was Dominic, and you won't believe what he said. "I just saw Anna throw a brick through your window and run. I told you she was bad news. You should have listened to me." You would not believe the rage I felt. I was so angry I couldn't even speak for a moment, but then I just exploded. I screamed at him that I knew it was him, and I was calling the police right now. He tried to protest, but I hung up on him and immediately called them. When they arrived, Dominic wasn't in his room, but when it was opened up, a large stash of illegal drugs was found. The manager of my student halls assured me that he'd be getting kicked out for this, and the police said that they would be getting in touch with him. After this, I never saw Dominic again. I changed my phone number and never unblocked him on social media. A couple of times I was tempted to out of sheer curiosity, but decided it wasn't worth it. I think he dropped out, because I don't know exactly what happened to him. My relationship with Anna didn't last. She was never quite clear on why she ended it, but I actually suspect that Dominic's freakish behavior scared her off, even though it wasn't my fault. Ah well, life goes on. Dominic, I hope whatever issues you're going through, you sort them out, and I hope you find a guy who actually does want to be with you. But please, let's never meet again. Let me tell you of the grocery store man. Having left the office late, my friend and I commuted back to the town in which we lived. We were each in our own vehicles, which comes in later. We had decided beforehand to stop off at the local supermarket for our tradition of checking out steaks and seeing if we could pick up anything decent at a good price. As usual, all the good ones had been taken, so my friend grabbed a couple of ingredients for spaghetti, and we checked out and left. Outside, we came to where our cars were parked. The parking lot was fairly deserted, and our cars were in a pretty open spot. A few spaces away, a running car was parked, and a middle-aged man was loudly speaking to a dog inside, commanding it to sit and stay. I didn't catch the dog's name. It didn't seem important. My friend and I talk. We were talking about the possibility of an office reunion, and we stood outside for a few moments, talking about the recent SNL opening hosted by Steve Carell. Finally, we parted ways and each got into our cars. My friend pulled away, and that's when the man talking to his dog made eye contact with me. "He's a good dog, military trained," the man shouted at me with a grin. Being of a small town custom, I returned the smile and shouted back, "Right on." Evidently the man took this as an invitation to approach me. I'm not exactly the most welcome or social person, so this wasn't very pleasant for me. Wanting to be polite, I listened to him explain that he was ex-military and had gotten the dog from the military. I kept the door of the car between him and I, and kept one foot in the car, which I hoped he would understand from my body language as me wanting to leave. I thought it was a bit odd that a middle-aged man would just randomly approach a bigger guy in the parking lot of a grocery store. Instead, he explained to me that he was picking up a few things for a party he was having. He held his hand really close to my face and flashed a mini bottle of whiskey. "I've got a little bit of weed in the car," he explained with a grin, "and a bit of liquor for a good time." I nodded and said something along the lines of, "Sounds like a good time." He pointed to his car and explained that he had taken it from his ex. "That bitch never paid for it. I've taken it to the sheriff and everything. They said it was a civil matter, so I'm in the clear. They're good guys. I know them all." I nodded along. I took a long look at his pupils to check for severe constrictions or dilations, but they didn't seem abnormal. The man still seemed high, or maniac or something. At this point, he thought it acceptable to show me that he was carrying a firearm. He lifted his coat up and said, "Got a .38 here. It's got real power." I'm not really a stranger to guns, so this wasn't the kind of thing to freak me out. Overall, though, I was starting to get a strange feeling from the guy. He was clearly either under the influence or something else. I didn't want to stay any longer, so I explained that I had to get going. He nodded and said, Well, here's my number, man. Give me a call. We should party or something. He held up his hand for a fist bump, which I accepted. He then listed off his cell phone number and told me to call. I told him his number back, so I wouldn't have to grab my phone or look for a pen or anything. "I'll add you to my friends list, man," he said. "I got this great place with a pool and a sweet wood stove. You can come out and we can party. We'll make it all topless too, 18 plus only." He gave me a weird look. "How old are you, by the way?" "I'm 24. "That sounds like fun, dude," I replied. "I'm a Christian though, so I'm not too interested in that kind of stuff." Suddenly his demeanor changed. "Oh, me too, friend. God saved me, and I got the spirit in me." He then proceeded to roll the sleeves of his left arm up and pointed to his arm. "My arm hair moves when the spirit is moving in me." He then pointed to a street lamp that had turned on. "I saw God once. It was like that strange orange glow everywhere, man." I nodded along and said my traditional, "Right on, man." This is my usual go-to for all conversations. He then asked my name. "Jerry," I told him. "That's my son's name," he shouted. He then told me to call him, and I listed off his number again, assuring him that I would give him a call when I leave. Stuffing the mini bottle of whiskey into his pocket, he explained, "All that stuff about partying, I don't really do it. I smoke a little weed here and there and drink sometimes, you know." I gave my usual, "Right on, man." This man was distracted by a woman in a blue Jeep pulling up next to his car. "Good doggy," he shouted out as the woman got out of her car. "Good doggy. She's gonna get a treat." I thought the man was talking about the woman. She also appeared rather uncomfortable, a feeling that I shared. "I love your car, ma'am," he then shouted. "Go Michigan." A Michigan football team that has blue as their primary color. I started to slide into my car when he grabs the sleeve of my sweatshirt. "Hey man, forgot to tell you, I was in the music video for Millionaire Son. You know, that Creedence song?" Of course, the song is actually named Fortunate Son, but I slide into my car as he explains how he was in the army during the Iran hostage crisis. I mentioned my grandfather was a Marine, which he then takes as an invitation to grab my shoulder and tell me about his personal rivalry with the Marine Corps. He then mentions he was a military driver and a trick to driving intoxicated. Finally, I get into my car and back out, eager to leave. I pull out of the store and out onto the street, only to see that he's following me. Great. I had already dialed up my friend to explain this strangest conversation. When I see this guy's car following me, I get into the other lane and pull into the lot of our local sheriff's station. He leaves me after pulling up alongside, honking several times. I didn't see him after that. My friend told me I should call the cops. Thinking back on the guy telling me about carrying a gun with a ton of alcohol and weed and driving a potentially stolen car, I think my friend was right. I'm a little bit socially unaware, so I didn't think back on it. Either way, grocery guy, let's not meet again. Each year around this time, I open up my Time Hop app, and I am reminded of a night 3 years ago. Photos of softball-size black and blue bruises all over the right side of my body come up. I'm honestly somewhat thankful for that, because it could have been much worse. I'll just never know. 3 years ago, after a blackout Wednesday night with friends, I found myself locked out of my partner at the time's apartment at 3 a.m. She was out with co-workers doing the same thing. Her serving shift ended. We live in a big city, so I'd taken the train from where the night ended with my friends straight to her place, and decided I'd just wait for her rather than head back home, as the commute would be another half hour or so, and my phone was dying. I was honestly just ready to sleep. In hindsight, I obviously just should have headed to my own apartment that night. After multiple texts and phone calls from her to come home, my partner, being thoroughly annoyed with me, was not in any rush to end her night. Drunk and upset, I sat at the entrance of the gates of her apartment community and sulked. It was raining and cold, and I was exhausted. Putting myself in this situation alone was my parents' worst nightmare. But at this point my phone was dead. I didn't have enough cab money, and there was no way in hell I was walking 15 minutes back to the train to head to my own apartment. A few minutes later, a man in a ski mask, sunglasses, and an oversized parka walks up to me. I remember him so vividly asking if I was okay. I responded that I was fine, and to please stay away from me. I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I thought for a split second he was genuinely concerned. I mean, here I was, a college-aged girl, sitting outside in the rain at 3 a.m. completely alone. But at 3 a.m, you don't just approach a girl dressed like that and mean no harm. He then brandished an X-Acto knife, and then asked, "Are you sure you're okay?" He picked me up with one hand while striking at the back of my hood with the knife. All I could do was scream. I know I asked him why he was doing that, but I couldn't even bring myself to pull out the mace in my coat pocket. I was so stunned. Talk about fight, flight, or freeze. I don't know what it was, if it was a car that drove by, or my screaming that caused him to stop. But after the longest 30 or so seconds of my life, he threw me to the ground and ran, leaving me with those awful aforementioned bruises. I'll be forever grateful for the thick hood of my coat that came away with some knife cuts. Had my hood not been up, he would have absolutely sliced the back of my neck and head. My partner pulled up in a cab a few minutes later. At least, I think it was a few minutes later. It was really a blur. I definitely went into a state of shock. We called 911 from her charged phone, and I stayed awake for the police to come and take a report, but didn't hear much else afterwards. There was a decent amount of crime in my city, so I wasn't really expecting much to come of it. What scares me the most was that 1, I still don't know what the man wanted. 2, he knows what I look like, and I have absolutely no idea what he looks like. 3, I'm pretty certain I was followed all the way from the transit station to the apartment complex, which was a fairly long walk. Those 3 reasons still give me chills. Ski mask man, let's not meet again. These events happened within the last months of 2018, over a 4-month period to be exact. The Tales of the North, as I can colourfully dub them, started when I decided to attend a college in the north of New Jersey to renew my certification in interpreting. The neighbourhood in which the school is located in is, to say the least, a bit shady, and not all desirable to navigate to at night. Points of general interest are easy enough to get to, and for what it's worth, I'd move back to that neighbourhood. But when you're surrounded by druggies hidden in corners, you never know what can happen. Outside my very own apartment, I heard tell of a dude being chucked from a moving car, all battered and beaten, as the people he was with just dipped. So yeah, the things you do for betterment, right? The first story occurs either in late October or mid-November, certainly after my girlfriend, who I'll call Richie, and I got together. It was one of those days where an escape is much, much needed and deserved. She and I had been planning to step out and live a bit, rather than sitting around Netflix and chilling, or other typical lazy person stuff. An iced coffee and donut run seemed the ideal thing to interrupt our monotonous evening. We've all been there. Our original plan was simply to Uber there, like regular people, in Rochelle's words. Yet, due to some 33-year-old woman-child overhearing us, or being invited by Richie herself, we were forced to walk, due to this infant having wormed herself into our date, wanting to exercise, and Richie's overly nice and accommodating personality. So it's me, my girl who has anxiety, and this chick that we're basically babysitting, all out on a glorious adventure where anything could happen. Indeed, Richie and I were muttering how bullshit this turned out to be, and how she was so sorry she didn't just say screw it and get an Uber. Now, perhaps I should mention that we're all visually impaired. Richie and I are totally blind, and the girl with us is partially. So, of all of us, I am still the most at ease and calm, being used to travelling alone. Typical introvert loner dude. Don't judge. So we've been on the road for at least 10 minutes. And after some minor detouring in the usual, Dunkin' Donuts is here. Right? Yeah, it is. We somehow got derailed and decided on going to a Starbucks. Coffee is coffee in the end, I guess. During this time, I'm thinking, these two can stay. I'm getting a cab back home. Yeah, nobody was in the mood anymore. To you walkers out there, I'm sorry for dissing your style. Of course, it's when we head back to the apartment that things happened. We start walking back home. The woman-child in front of us is whining on about something, while Richie and I are giving the Uber everywhere vow. We're on the same road between the cafe and the apartment complex, when some woman appears from probably some back alley and intercepts us. You guys need help? Come on, I got ya. I am on my guard at once. She positively reeks of liquor, and is possibly tweaked out on some crap. I'm a school teacher, you know, she incoherently slurs, as I slowly move in front of Richie. Our companion becomes far more reserved as this crazy tweaker tries to lead us through the alleyways. I'm just thinking, how the hell to lose this lady? Richie was just hoping not to die. At long last, we come to the street where the complex is located, and I try to subtly drop the hint to the teacher that she can leave now, and that we have it from here. A convenient commotion from some rabble-rousers must have distracted the tweaker for long enough for me to push the girls into the path of the apartment. The tweaker yelling after us, all the while as we vanished into our lobby, never again seeing her. Richie and I can laugh about it now. Indeed, we often use the school teacher as an inside joke, but still, who can say what might have come to pass? Segueing into the next story, which happened only to me. I was heading to a 7-Eleven or something, walking, ironically. Nearing my destination, another tweaker in all his tweaking glory popped up and pursued me, trying to talk to me as if I were his bro. Bro, piss off, you're not welcomed. I say that, escaping into the store. Even within the store I could hear the guy yelling. He doesn't want to be my friend. He doesn't like me. I don't have a friend. Now, we backtrack to what I believe was September, when I first met Richie, and my face lights up even as I think about it. This event was hers. She was with some residents of the complex outside at about 7 or 8, and we hadn't even been hanging out, sadly. As I recall it, she was standing apart from the others who were vaping or something, and some blokes started literally circling her while sniffing. Yeah, she said that they were sniffing her. For a bit of background, I am a 15-year-old pasty white girl, measuring 5'5" and kind of thick. I live in America, somewhere up north, where literally nothing happens. I live in a house where my backyard and a park intermingle with each other. The park is just a long stretch of land to play frisbee golf and for people to go on walks and runs. So it is great for me and my 1-year-old German Shepherd puppy to walk and run around. This park / the main walking trail is horizontal to my house, and said house is up on a super steep hill, and tons of people visit this park all the time, all year round, and tons of people accidentally wander into our little backyard because of the frisbee golf trail. But what happened in this story does not align with any possible wholesome explanation. It was semi-late, probably right after 7 p.m, and I had just eaten dinner. My dad tells me to go walk the dog. His name is Sunny. And I begrudgingly obliged and got all my athletic stuff and the leash, and we were off. I'm used to the steep hill, but that doesn't mean I'm able to walk very gracefully down it. My dad is sitting on the porch doing whatever, while my dog, although 1 year old, is dragging me down the hill towards the main trail. I take note of a man in a grey hoodie getting out of his car in the parking lot to the far right of me and walking in the same direction as I am. My only thought is that I don't want to have to deal with Sunny freaking out, because he gets nervous around other people and dogs, so I am walking quickly to gain more distance between this man, and even though he is quite far back, he is in a grey hoodie, despite it being swelteringly hot, black shorts and sunglasses. I am not close enough to distinguish possible height, but he has the same body type and face, from what I can see, as famous American restaurateur Guy Fieri. Anyway, I am walking down the path and get to a fork in the road. There is one path you can take to the left, which is for the frisbee golfers, and one to the right, which is a steep incline of a dirt trail for hikers. Both paths are heavily wooded. The path to the left loops back around to the main trail, while the one on the right loops back much further away. Feeling just a little paranoid, and not wanting to die using this as a test to see if he's following me, / hoping to get rid of him so my dog will stop freaking out, I take the trail to the left. I get about halfway and stop to wait for him to keep walking down the main trail as I catch my breath, when I suddenly see something that makes everything about this park seem suddenly terrible. I see a flash of grey to the right of me, and the man has taken the same path as me, and he is seemingly close, seeing as how I have not heard a sound. Immediately I sprint in the opposite direction and stick to the edge of the river, because there are lots of trees there, and I am hoping I can be well hidden from him. Although looking back, I should have stayed out in the open on the path, so that more people could have seen me. I jog the rest of the way home, which was not very far. I reach the backyard, and my dog has no idea what's going on, and neither does my dad, who has been there the whole time. I turn back around and suddenly have the urge to vomit when I watch him cross the bridge, and immediately upon seeing that I am with my dad, turn back around and walk towards the parking lot. There is no explanation as to why he, number one, followed me down the trail for frisbee golfers, because he didn't have any frisbee stuff with him. Number two, followed me into my backyard, because what? Now this guy knows where I live. I haven't seen him since. I hate being home alone, and while I do still walk my dog down that main trail, it has never been the same, and I always carry some kind of weapon. Yes, I told my dad, and I never walk alone with my dog unarmed anymore. Be careful, because I know that even if you think you're safe with your dog, that creep who followed me home didn't seem to give two shits that I had a giant German Shepherd with me. You never know. You really can never know. If memory serves me right, this happened in the summer of 06 or 07, so I must have been between 16 and 17. It takes place in a town in Bulgaria called Shumen. We were out at a bar with friends, and somewhere at about 12:30 a.m, we decided it was time to head back home. So when we separated, I was left with only one more friend, since he was heading my way. He's only a year older than me. We walked about 10 minutes until we decided to stop at a playground to sit on a bench, since my friend had a problem with his legs. During those years, he often felt pain from continuous walks, which might have been from the weightlifting he used to practice before then. We'd been sitting there for about 15 minutes, talking about this and that, when two guys that looked a bit younger than us, maybe a year younger, walked over. At that moment, I should probably mention that me and my friend are both male. I was about 170 centimeters tall and 62 kilos, whereas my friend was a bit heavier and about my height. These two guys were a bit taller than us, somewhere between 175 and 180 centimeters, and they looked quite fit. At first, the conversation was rather ordinary. They asked us what we were doing there, what our names were, and where we lived. As stupid as I am, I answered them honestly. The only direct answer that I didn't give was where I lived, since I only mentioned a pub that was near my home. But my friend, let's call him Enzo, thoughtfully gave them lies to each question. They noticed that we were playing with something, which was my MP4 player, and little by little, this is where things started going wrong. Hey, what's that? It's my MP4 player. Oh, cool. How much is it? I don't know. It was a present for my birthday last year, and it's not really polite to ask how much a gift costs. Can I see it for a bit? Sure. When a stranger asks you something like that, it would be the smartest thing to say no. Judging by Enzo's look, that's what he wanted me to say. But with my polite nature, I stupidly gave it to them. They started looking at it from the side and muttering something to each other. They'd been looking at it for about 2 minutes, not saying a word, and I was thinking during that time that Enzo was slightly starting to get a little further from the three of us. I was starting to worry a bit that they were taking their time looking at it, so I asked for them to return it since we really had to go. One of the guys looked at me for a second and walked behind the other guy. The other guy started talking some random stuff. I can't remember what exactly, but it was obvious he was trying to divert my attention from the other guy. I say to them, "Come on guys, it's really late. Where's the rush? Let's talk a little longer." I was starting to shake, since I didn't like where things were going. And honestly, I've never felt like picking fights or even arguing, and these guys were clearly trying my patience. I think we've talked enough. Please return the MP4 player." Then the other guy turned back to me and mockingly said, "I don't know what you're talking about." At the same time, I could clearly hear the music escaping the MP4 player. He had put it in his shoe between it and his foot. "Come on, it's not funny." They started laughing like a bunch of idiots, and it was clear that I wasn't getting that MP4 player back easily. One of the guys noticed Enzo had turned his back and had walked a little far from us. "Hey dude, what are you doing over there? The fun's over here." Enzo was trying to call one of our bigger friends at the time, but when he noticed that guy was walking over to him, he quickly put his phone back into his pocket. "Come on, come over here." Both of us were on edge, unsure of what we were going to do now, and they kept mocking and teasing. I tried asking a few more times, hoping they would quit, but they kept enjoying themselves. So I got pissed, and tried the same thing Enzo was doing, but I wasn't trying to hide it. I turned my back, and started walking a little faster to the side, scrolling my call list, searching for the same friend Enzo was trying to dial. Then I heard that irritating voice behind me. "Come on, don't do that. Give me that phone." I ignored the guy, but while I was still scrolling, I saw with my peripheral how close he was, and for a part of a second, kicked my hand when my phone went flying. Enzo tried to run and grab it, but the other guy got to it first. Now they looked more serious. Now, since you have an MP4 player, you must have earphones, right?" I shook and didn't say a thing. I think the earphones were swinging from my shirt then. I just grabbed them and took a few steps back. Even though we were older than these two, they were much faster, and I was starting to wonder what the hell we were going to do. I hadn't been in a fight since 5th grade, and even then I wasn't very good at it. I was sure if it went down to it, that we might get hurt, or at least me. And the guy was still walking over to me. "Come on, hand them over. You must have some hidden coke in them." When I heard that, I didn't know if this guy was serious or just plain stupid. First of all, I'd never heard of anyone in town talk about drugs. And second, these were small earphones. You clearly couldn't hide anything in them. He mumbled something about the rubber over the earphones could hide a little bit, and still just thought the guy was an idiot. But I was more worried about what we were going to do. Just as though we didn't have a choice, I heard Enzo yelling, "Hey! Hey!" When I turned around, a patrol police car was driving by the street next to the playground, and fortunately it stopped. At that moment, the two threw my MP4 player and my phone, which ended up with a cracked screen after the second it had fallen to the ground, and started running to the lower opposite side of the playground. The car sped off after them, and Enzo quickly helped me get my stuff off the ground. "What do we do now?" "Let's just go back home. I don't want to keep up with this crazy night." He might have been hoping that I was suggesting to go to the police and explain to them what had happened, but I was shaken and tired from the whole ordeal. We reached my street several minutes later, and I talked for a little more and tried to relax, before he left off for his home, which was much further from mine. On the next morning he called me and told me when he was walking by the police, he noticed that one of the guys was just walking out. He was at a safe distance, so the guy didn't notice him. They probably couldn't hold him there since there was no evidence of anything happening, besides a bunch of kids falling around. I told my parents a little later, and they knew how frightened I felt. Since they know me to be very peaceful, and as I mentioned before, I hate getting into fights. I know I have to be able to defend myself, but that's how I am. We never did go to the police to inform them of what happened, and we moved on. We still remember that night, even though I've mostly forgotten what they looked like. Enzo says he still remembers both of their faces. I remember only one, since he pretty much reminded me of the wrestler Jack Swagger. Anyway, stupid future drug addicts, let's not meet again. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed tonight's stories. I think I'm going to put a poll out tomorrow. I have 3 unconventional topics, and hopefully you like the options I give you. And you can let me know which one you would like to see for tomorrow's video. Don't forget that if you liked the video, it would mean a lot if you dropped a like and left a comment with your thoughts. And if you're new here, be sure to subscribe, and why not hit the bell icon for good measure. I'm pretty excited because my wife and I have booked tickets to go see Captain Marvel tomorrow. We're going to a midday screening that's baby friendly. Yay! So that's something to look forward to. Anyway, if there's a story that you wish to share, be sure to send it to my email or drop it to my Reddit. Either are fine. Just be sure to add plenty of detail to maximize the chances of your story being read. But anyway, for now guys, I'm going to sign off. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.